Hi, I'm Gale Brewer, and I represent the west side of Manhattan and the northern part of Clinton in the City Council. And we're here at Manhattan Neighborhood Network. I thank them so much for partnering in this particular show today. We have great guests. We're going to be talking about the proposed ban on sugary beverages, particularly large cups of sugary beverages. And we have phenomenal guests. Our first guest is Dr. Susan Consagra. She's Assistant Commissioner of the Bureau of Chronic Disease Prevention and Tobacco Control at the Department of Health. And we also have Andrew Reggie, who's the Executive Director at the New York City Hospitality Alliance. And I think we'll start with you, Susan, talking about the amazing work that you do at the Department of Health. I know that you have merged these two departments recently. Obviously, this issue of beverages is quite in the public's eye. So I'd love you to talk a little bit about why you think the ban and a specific reason as to why you think it's a good idea, and then just generally the issue of what you're doing to try to deal with obesity. I think all of us in general know that this is an issue. Your commissioner and your department have done a great job of thinking about public health. Obviously, I work with you on some of the smoking bans in parks and beaches. So if you could just share some of your ideas, and then I hope Andrew feel free to jump in.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And at the Health Department, we're doing a wide variety of things to work on both obesity and tobacco. And today I wanted to talk about the sugary beverage proposal. That's just one of the many things we're doing at the Health Department to help combat obesity. We know obesity is the second leading cause of death in New York City. About 5,800 New Yorkers are dying each year from obesity. And what this proposal does is really help reduce the consumption of sugary beverages, which we know are a leading driver of the obesity epidemic. So what it does is require food service establishments in New York City to have a maximum size for sugary drinks of 16 ounces. And the goal of that is to help reduce the consumption of these beverages. We know based on a lot of the studies on portion sizes that people tend to consume larger amounts when they're given larger portions. And so what this does is really bring these portions back down to a more appropriate level. And so this was just recently introduced by the Board of Health, and we had a public hearing a few days ago, and we'll be having a vote in September.
Okay. Andrew, feel free to jump in. I guess one of my questions that I understand the goal, but I am concerned, as I'm sure Andrew is, about the restaurants and their future, the delis and their future, and the bodegas and their future. They may not all be part of the Hospitality Alliance, but what's interesting to me is now I'm learning the difference between a bodega and a deli. As a New Yorker, I call everything a bodega. So but Andrew, jump in, and I hope we'll figure out answer to that in a few minutes, because I think it has something to do with who can or cannot sell.
Thanks so much, Councilmember. It's really great to be here. And, first off, I think everyone gets it. From the New York City Hospitality Alliance's standpoint, we haven't actually taken a formal position on the issue, but this proposal does raise many questions, several different concerns. Obesity is obviously a very important issue. It needs to be addressed. But since it is such an important issue, we need to address it in the proper way. One of the concerns is, does the Board of Health have the regulatory authority to pass such a proposal? Now, this would only impact food service establishments that are regulated by the New York City Department of Health. So those are restaurants, some nightlife venues, movie theaters, etc. However, bodegas, grocery stores, and other venues such as those are not regulated. And those establishments happen to be where a lot of the sugary drinks are being purchased in the larger size. So in a sense, the department has conceded that they do not have the authority to regulate all sugary beverages in New York City, only those that come under the regulatory purview of their authority. The second major issue is that it sets a precedent. If the Board of Health is to pass this soda ban, we continue to hear, what's next? What's next? There are a lot of things that are unhealthy, especially if, eaten or drinking in too large quantities. So our feeling is that working more cooperatively between the hospitality industry and with the department, we can do outreach education, much of which the department is already doing, but we're setting up a more adversarial relationship to address an important matter. And if you're adversarial in a sense of trying to do something that's better for all of society, that may not be the best way to achieve the greatest outcome.
Okay. So Susan, you may want to answer some of those questions.
Yeah.
And in addition, some of my colleagues in the City Council who are quite vocal on this issue are also concerned about another suggestion, which is why not more activity opportunities for students? Because anybody with kids in the public schools know that there's not much gym time, et cetera. So those are the two questions that I always get: the gym time issue and the activity issue, and then the one that Andrew's raising.
Sure. So this proposal is just one aspect of a multi-pronged effort we're doing to combat obesity. And we're doing a number of things, and some of those involve things in the school system. So for example, there's a program called Move to Improve where we help increase physical activity levels in schools. We're doing other things like increasing access to healthier fruits and vegetables, especially in areas that have low access to those. So this is just one piece of that campaign. And despite all the things that we have been doing over the last 8-10 years, obesity is still increasing. So what we're doing is not enough. We need to do more. If you look at physical activity, which I think is an argument that many people make, we should be increasing our physical activity levels. Well, one 20-ounce soda, it takes 3 miles to burn off the calories from one 20-ounce soda. So although we absolutely think physical activity is important, it alone is not the answer to really combat the increased consumption that we have of these sugary drinks. Going back to the question earlier about the Board of Health, the Board of Health has been established in New York City since the 1800s, and they've dealt with a wide variety of issues. And the Board of Health was actually established so we could have a credible body of scientists and physicians that actually wouldn't be influenced by politics. And so their goal is really to look at the issues, look at the science behind the issues, and make evidence-based decisions. And that's what they've done for a wide variety of things, including things like cholera and infectious diseases, things like lead paint, things like trans fat. So they've really looked at a wide variety of issues, and their goal is to make a very scientific and evidence-based decision.
How do you, though, work with somebody like the Hospitality Alliance, which I know for a fact is incredibly willing to work on many levels? So how would you suggest in a situation like this, with this kind of regulation being proposed, there could perhaps be more opportunities to work together?
I think we certainly encourage the industry and would certainly like to think about how we can increase the number of healthier options. If you go into many of the bodegas in some of these neighborhoods, there's no healthy beverage options. So how can we increase those options? Certainly many restaurants and companies are now thinking about how to increase low-calorie beverages and market some of these products, and we absolutely encourage that. There's a whole host of beverages that could be healthier and could be promoted, as opposed to the things that we really see on the shelves today, which are these sugary drinks.
Andrew, how does that help or hurt the enterprises, though?
It's a very complicated issue. I mean, especially in certain neighborhoods where you see a greater number of fast food restaurants, more unhealthy menu options, something that needs to be discussed. But restaurateurs, business owners are in a business to hopefully be successful, and at the end of the day, hopefully be profitable. So there's a lot of factors. So often what a restaurant does and what a hospitality business does is cater to the requests and the needs of their customers. So in specific neighborhoods, for different reasons, societal reasons, people request different types of foods, different types of drinks. So it's our belief if you give a business owner an incentive to, which we've worked on partially with the department, to promote healthier menu options, that's a terrific first step. There also has to be education within the community, so when those customers go into the restaurant, they say, I want this drink or healthy option versus the more unhealthy option. It's very difficult, especially with fresh fruits and vegetables like apples on menus. The shelf life is not very long. So it differs from other cuisines like a French fry and so forth. So again, it's a complicated issue. We need to change the society as a whole, have them request the healthy options. And if the customers are requesting it, believe me, the restaurants and the ones that will be successful, they'll offer them.
The other question I had, Susan, too, was that I actually have in our neighborhood a deli and a 7-Eleven. And so when you have two differently regulated stores, one by the state and one by the city, I don't know if that's correct, but I believe it is. Then how are we working with the state so that one isn't penalized over another?
Right. So
Because I'm very concerned particularly about our non-chain stores.
right. So the Board of Health has authority over food service establishments, which are, for example, restaurants, things that have the letter grading system or letter grades that you might see on the outside window. And so those are the places that would be established. And if you look at where people consume these larger size beverages, that absolutely is one of those areas. Other locations are controlled by the state, and one of the things that we are working on here at the city is also working with, for example, bodegas to increase the number of healthier options. And so just a few weeks ago, we launched a program called Shop Healthy Here, and it was the idea that we would work with, and we've done this in the past, work with bodega owners to really increase the number of healthier options, really educate the community and have the community
bodegas
groups.
have the state regulation, just so we're clear.
Right, and so increase the community groups that can work with these bodega owners, and also working with distributors and suppliers and making sure that they can actually get these healthy foods to stock on their shelves from the distributors. So we're really working across the chain.
Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, these are like the proactive initiatives that we think are terrific, and we encourage, and we would like to work on these type of initiatives with the department and with others. It makes me think at the public hearing a few days ago on the sugary drink proposal, Brooklyn Borough President Marty Markowitz, in a style that only he could do, and paraphrasing, but basically what he said was that he's overweight not because he's drinking too much sodas, it's because he's eating too much pasta, too many pastrami sandwiches, too many red velvet cupcakes. And it was very symbolic in the sense is that this is the discussion that has to be had, is that health, not only just obesity, is a lifestyle. It is not all exercise. It incorporates exercise. Mm-hmm. It's not drinking any soda. It's regulating how much soda you drink on your own, and ensuring that in these communities that may not have access to fruits, vegetables, and other healthy foods, educating them why they're an important part of your diet and providing access to them. But our feeling, again, goes back to the concern that just regulating one type of cuisine or one type of drink becomes a concern, because it opens up the floodgate of, well, if people are drinking too much soda, well, maybe someone's eating too much fried food or too many burgers. And as we all know, it never ends. So we think education, outreach, and stepping away from the regulatory nature of these proposals.
So certainly you've gotten the discussion started, but I do think Andrew has a point, and the public, of course, is, because we have talked about salt and we have talked about smoking, and the public is worried about what's next. Why did you pick the beverage?
Yeah, so it's really supported by the science. So if you look at sugary drinks, that is the largest contributor to added sugars to our diets. And I have I'll give you an example. This is a 64-ounce beverage that you can now buy at a KFC, for example. And a beverage of this size has the equivalent of about 60 packets of sugar. If you look at all the different food classes, sugary drinks contribute the most sugar to our diet. Also, if you look at the number of calories that we're consuming now as opposed to 30 years ago, before the obesity epidemic really started, the number one source of those added calories are sugary drinks. And they're very different from food. You get zero to minimal nutritional value from a sugary drink. And also, they don't help you feel more full.
So the red velvet cupcakes we can get nutritional value from. Yay.
They also, I will say, I wouldn't quite go that far.
I'm just teasing based on the borough president.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't go that far. But I will say that food is satiating. So when you have food, you will consume fewer calories later. And so sugary drinks don't act in the same way. When you consume sugary drinks, you don't feel satiated, and then you'll consume just as many calories later. So it's a very different item than food is.
You represent restaurants and nightlife. Do you also represent, I guess, some of the delis that have an A in the window that look like, not a restaurant, but are actually part of the Department of Health regulation?
Correct, yeah. Our membership is based on the restaurants that receive letter grade. So if you come under the regulatory authority of the New York City Department of Health and you have a letter grade in our window, you're either a member or at least eligible to be a member of the New York City Hospitality Alliance.
Okay. So in the restaurants in particular, do you have those kinds of large drinks, or is it more on a table? I'd never have seen a large drink that size, but maybe because I've never ordered one.
Yeah, I think there's certain restaurants that lean more towards the larger beverages that may be a little bit more concerned with the proposal. But then again, it goes back, as I said, everyone supports the idea of reducing obesity. But again, the concerns go, which are serious concerns. Many of the council members that testified at the hearing felt that this is something that should go through the legislative process. It's much different something going through the legislative process than being passed through a Board of Health with members appointed by the mayor who is in support of this proposal. So that's, again, a consideration. Also, it sets a precedent. If they do this, what is next? As I mentioned, there's a lot of foods that are unhealthy if you consume too much. You can eat a double cheeseburger, a triple cheeseburger. That's not healthy. Again, it's teaching lifestyles. Obesity is an epidemic across the nation and it needs to be addressed. Just addressing it in one locale and regulating only one portion of the industry in this locale that sells these beverages is, too laser focused. It needs a greater, more comprehensive.
So there's one issue. Go ahead. There's one issue, of course,
Yeah.
is who's doing the regulation, and and the second issue, of course, is again back to this issue of why the beverages. But go ahead.
And I think to the issue of why are we regulating on this issue? If a virus was killing 5,800 people a year in New York City, people would be clamoring to have the government do something about it. So obesity, it's not a virus, but it is killing 5,800 people a year. People are suffering. We have thousands of people with diabetes. About 1 in 8 New Yorkers has
A lot of
diabetes.
children too. In terms of
1 in 4 teens now has diabetes. This is or pre-diabetes. So this is a huge shift, and it's really come in parallel with this increase in beverage sizes. Again, this is just one piece that we are doing in a multi-pronged effort against obesity. And if you look at some of the history of other things that we've done to combat just obesity or other chronic health problems, I'll give you one example, and that is, or two examples. So if you look at our Smoke-Free Air Act that we implemented in 2002, at the time, with that change, people were very hesitant. People were very fearful. The industry was very fearful. People thought they would go out of business. And none of those things held true. And now nobody would argue to put the smoke back in our restaurants.
But that was done by the city council to pick up on Andrew's point, right?
Yeah, and I would just go back to two things. Yes, if there was an infectious disease that was killing 5,800 people a year, people would be clamoring for the department to do something. But having a disease that's being spread throughout the population versus drinking a large sugary drink, I think are two very clear-cut different issues. And it will not be addressed just by cutting back these sodas. I don't know, but I would be interested to see if the department had real statistics showing that X number of children will not get diabetes within the next 5 years if these sugary drinks are banned. I know there may be some information out there, but again, they're proposing and likely passing these types of rules without the hard evidence that I think is required. And even if there was hard evidence, the way that it's going, they're going about it is again of question.
There's a lot of evidence that sugary drinks are related to diabetes and obesity, and if you look at the literature that's come out over the last decade, they've done numerous studies, and the experts in nutrition and two leading institutions like Harvard and the UNC School of Public Health, their researchers there absolutely point to the link between sugary drinks and obesity and diabetes, and they've done studies where they've looked at people over time, and those people that consume more sugary drinks are more likely to get obesity and diabetes. And for example, for every 1 sugary drink a child drinks, their risk of obesity goes up by 60%. So that goes back to that stat. So there is no denial of the fact that sugary drinks are linked to obesity and diabetes. That is absolute evidence, and the leading public health institutions do say that. So.
But is there something we could do more with the Hospitality Alliance to do the education? Go ahead.
Well, yeah, no, I would just say that I think there is a lot of information, statistics, and data out there. But my question is that by not allowing certain establishments in New York City to sell beverages larger than 16 ounces, how much will that cut back on that evidence where a lot of these beverages that probably cause the obesity and the diabetes are purchased in grocery stores and bodegas that will not come under this regulation.
I want to go back to that, though. That is one of my questions. Because I worry about not just from the obesity issue, but from the competition level field issue.
Right. And I just want to correct one notion. So this is not a ban on sugary beverages. What this does is just set a standard size for those sugary drinks. So people can still consume sugary drinks. They can consume as many sugary drinks as what they want. But what it does is it sets that standard serving size as 16 ounces, which is already twice the serving size that the industry uses, which is around 8 ounces. So it sets it at 16 ounces. So what it does is it, and what we know from the studies on portion sizes is when people get a smaller portion, they consume less and they feel just as satisfied. They don't even realize they've gotten less. And so that's what it's doing. This is not a ban on sugary drinks.
But what about this issue of working with the state to try to level the playing field? If this goes forward, you do have two side-by-side enterprises, one that can sell and one that can't, right? That's that's not an issue necessarily for anybody at this table, but it is for the
state. Yeah, I mean, I will say,
the enterprises.
People like to do one-stop shopping. When people sit down to eat, they like to have a beverage, and so what this really impacts is people going to restaurants. I think it's unlikely, and it would be much more effort for people to go someplace, get their food, go to the next place to get their drink. That's unlikely to happen. This impacts restaurants where people eat and drink.
Okay, doesn't seem to be. I don't know whether you agree with that. I do think we will sometimes have a bodega next to a deli, and you regulate the deli, and the state regulates the bodega. And I just hope that the bodega continues to sell the large drink and the deli can't. That's what I'm talking about. But that's what people are bringing to my attention.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes back to my original comments that everyone supports the notion that we need to reduce obesity rates. We need more healthier options in the city. But the way that the Board of Health is going about this, do they have the regulatory authority? Number one. Number two, does it set a bad precedent for future regulations of size? Because what they are doing is regulating the size of a lawful product. And that raises many questions. But we want to work together. We want to address this as a whole. We want healthier options. And I think that the intent is positive. The concern is the way that we're going about it.
I mean, I do think in New York, as somebody who talked about smoking a lot, that we do need to have some guidelines. And goodness knows this topic has brought the issue of obesity to the fore in a way that other ways of discussing it cannot. It's really interesting. When you talk about obesity, people don't plug in to listen. But when they hear about a related topic, for whatever reason, it's like they start to pay attention. And I want to give the department credit for that, because that brings the obesity issue in another light, I think. And I congratulate you on that, because people were not talking about obesity until this topic came up. Sure. They know it's there. We all have friends, children. I have friends with children in particular, but it doesn't come up. So this is a way to get the topic discussed.
Right, and it's really about changing norms, and I think that's what some of these other things that we've done in the past, like trans fat, did happen through the Board of Health, and I think there were similar concerns brought up about trans fat before it went into effect. How will we do this, and how will we implement it? But
will our French fries taste differently?
Yeah, and now nobody asked to put the trans fat back in food, and in fact, a lot of companies and food companies advertise the fact that their products are trans fat free, and a lot of other jurisdictions have done it. So, I think with any new change, there is some concern, but for the most part, we accept these things as changes in our norms and recognize the health benefit.
Yeah, we always joke, right? Yeah, the trans fat, the margarine ban is, really what it is. And look, that is a good point. And I think that there are a lot of questions that are similar to the questions we have about the authority of the board to pass this sugary drink proposal. And it's just, I think, also interesting and important to differentiate the sugary drink proposal versus smoking. We know that there's secondhand smoke. If someone's smoking a cigarette, there can be effects to other people inside of a restaurant. Whereas when someone's consuming a beverage, that beverage is going to impact them internally. There's not, secondhand beverage consumption.
There are secondhand costs, and I will say, if you look at the cost of obesity to New York City, it's about $4 billion. And if you think about that for the average household, that's $1,200 that we're paying in medical care costs to combat obesity. So, there are those downstream consequences with that too. And not to mention the impact of diabetes on family members and other illnesses.
Are there other cities or localities that have discussed this or brought it up, or are we the first in New York?
We are the first to propose it.
All right.
Like many things that we've done.
Are there ways, Andrew, that if this goes through, I assume, I agree with you that it is a mayoral-appointed Board of Health. I always think things should go through the City Council. I can imagine that hearing. It would be very interesting.
Sure.
But the question would be, education would include what? In other words, is there something that can be done even on a positive note should it go through?
Sure, I think the department should continue all of their outreach and programs surrounding, about healthy eating. I think also engaging the industry and working with restaurateurs, especially those in neighborhoods that have high obesity rates, teaching them about healthy eating. But again, it's going to start in the schools, at the community centers, the temples, the churches, making sure that people live healthy lifestyles, because healthy lifestyles are the way that we can ensure lower rates of obesity and have a more conscious consumer.
Yeah, and I'm also a believer in going where people are. In other words, it's good, the advertisements are good and other topics, but the good thing about restaurants and nightlife and delis and all of our neighborhood institutions is people are there already. So that is a good place to do the education. Are there ways in which you think we could be partnering more with the hospitality industry?
I think going back to the idea of making sure that we're having healthier options in these settings, because right now, consumers oftentimes don't have a lot of choice when they go in, or a healthy choice, not only with beverages, but with other things. With beverages, if I wanted to get a 16 ounce, it's almost impossible to do that right now if you go to a fast food chain. So really working to increase those healthier options and healthier beverages, I think, is one area.
People definitely have to have the option, but you have to like it also. I'm always concerned that people are going to drink it at the same time.
Yeah, and people enjoy, if you grow up with a healthy, balanced diet as you grow and become an adult, most likely you're going to have a more healthy, balanced diet. But if you grow up drinking sugary drinks, living and growing up in an environment that does not have an emphasis and a focus on a healthy lifestyle, obesity is going to be an issue.
Yeah. Do you think, go ahead, do you think it's going to be more expensive? That's my other colleagues. I have my colleagues, ringing in my ears. But the issue, of course, is if we buy a large container, we can share it as a family. That comes up.
Right. I think I just want to go back to one point you had mentioned about the environment, and that is, I think the environment is absolutely key. And really what we are trying to do at the health department is make the default choice the healthier choice. And we've done that with a lot of other proposals, and I think that's the intent of this Board of Health proposal as well, because, single-handedly as a consumer, it is hard to combat all of the, promotion, the advertising, the choices that we do have right now that are put out there by the industry, and it's hard to do that by yourself. So really we want to make the environment
Unfortunately, we
healthier.
have to stop, but I'm hoping that this discussion will continue offline. And I thank both Dr. Susan Cassandra and certainly Andrew Reggie for your incredibly passionate and knowledgeable discussion here today on beverages and how we can work together for a healthier New York. Thank you both
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate being here.
Keep talking, I think, for a little while.
Absolutely.
This has been great.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you.
We all learned a lot, and how I think actually Andrew would be great to keep in touch with.
Yeah, definitely.
He's really.